Today we're going to talk about trucking 101, what you're missing that could be costing your case hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Let's define when we're saying trucking, I'm really referring to commercial vehicles. So let's talk about what those are. First thing you know, it is not a car wreck. And you may have heard that said by people in the past, but that's really important because one, the damages are bigger, the source of recovery is bigger, and the amount of steps you have to take and what you have to look into investigate is very different than a typical car accident. So what are we talking about? 18 wheelers, middle service trucks, work vans. This is one people miss a lot. Cars driven in the course and scope. We've had several cases where at first it appeared like someone was not working for someone, and it turned out they were. We had a case out in West Texas where someone was driving home from a bar, but it turned out his company let him use that truck, and a passenger was actually one of his coworkers, and another passenger was someone he supervised. And part of his responsibility was to make sure that they got home every day. And we're actually able to make that into a commercial vehicle case, which got us a larger source recovery over $1 million. So knowing what to look for is really important. There's delivery trucks, rideshare, of course. In rideshare, this has changed a lot the last few years. The laws used to be those were pretty easy to get the Uber or Lyft or whoever. But lately, they've been changing the policies where UIM isn't covered anymore. And also, the times that they're saying that they'll be accountable has changed. So you have to really know the ins and outs of these when you're looking at these cases. Bus wrecks. So what I was talking about before, what makes these cases different is one, the property damage can be way worse, of course, bigger vehicles, and the route that it takes to get here is more complicated. So you're going to have a variety of potential liable parties. You could have the person that hired the truck driver. You could have the truck driver themselves. You could have the truck driver's employer. You could have the shipper broker. We had a case recently, really horrible injuries. One client was burned over a lot of their body. The other lost vision. One eye lost most of it in another. And they only had $750,000 in insurance. Well, it turns out the drivers that had caused this wreck had a terrible driving history. And the shipper broker that hired them knew it. And we were able to get the shipper broker on the hook for hiring a bad driver, because a lot of this is almost like a Ponzi scheme, or where they're hiring drivers that aren't qualified. They have the bare minimum insurance, which is $750, which hasn't been changed in, I don't know, probably 15 years, and then trying to put all the risk on them, knowing that bad things are going to happen. And unfortunately, truck wrecks are up year over year, not going down. It's getting more dangerous on the roadway as the trucking population gets older, worse and worse drivers. So looking for other people that may be accountable is a big way to look. Also, loaders, we've had cases where the truck is misloaded and either stuff falls off or the truck flips over and hurts either the driver or someone else in the vehicle. So where do we start? Where do we look? Cases start way before the wreck happened. And it's important to know that. That's a little bit different as well than a car wreck, because there's so many more decisions that went into the process that led to the incident that you're being hired for. So you start with, okay, who hired them? When they hired them, what was the training like? And then who supervised them? And then we always look, right before the wreck, of course, and then the wreck itself. Each one of these is a different stage of the investigation, and you want to tailor your discovery to make sure you're covering each of those. I'm sure most of y'all heard of the reptile or spreading the tentacles of danger. This is really where you get into that, is showing how it wasn't just this one incident. They have a policy of hiring dangerous drivers. They don't train them well. The supervisor's not doing their job. And you'll see all these big packets of things that they're supposed to be doing, both from the regulations and their own company handbook. And we start going at like, you didn't do this, you didn't train, you didn't check their logs. For example, the wreck that we had where they were drunk going home from a bar, they were supposed to get blood tested according to company policy. And of course, they didn't do that. So the three things you're always looking at when you're looking at a truck case or commercial vehicle is liability, damages, source of recovery. And each one is going to drive, one, how much money you invest into the case in time and expenses, and how you go about pursuing it. If you have a case with massive damages, you're going to spend a lot more time figuring out, is there a liability angle here? On the same front, if you don't have a big source of recovery, it doesn't matter how big the damages are, it's going to be difficult to make a big recovery that can justify putting, $50,000, $100,000 into a case. Always thinking of it as a stool. You're missing one pillar, the stool falls over. So some of the things you want to look at when it comes to liability before the wreck itself is negligent hiring. You want to see, okay, what was the driver's history when they were hired by this company? That also ties to the shipper broker. Then the things that we've seen a lot of times is maybe they got the same incident. We had a case recently that we resolved for $6 million, and the truck driver, it was a commercial truck, ran a red light and killed our pedestrian client. And he ran a similar red light 4 times in the last 6 months. So that evidence is really important to showing it's not just a one-off. And that case was really sad because after the incident happened, the husband hired us and they had two small kids around my kid's age. And the police sent out a counselor, but the counselor wasn't to meet with our client. The counselor met with the truck driver to make sure he was feeling okay after killing this person, which is fine. But it just shows a lot of times the investigation is going to be biased towards the truck driver. And in fact, what I've seen a lot of the times is the crash report will be on the side of the person that killed someone because the other one's not there to tell their story. So you really have to dig to see it. And negligent retention, that's another thing that people are continuously violating their policies and they're letting them stick around. So, have they gotten caught speeding? Have they had other wrecks? And that can all be found in their, like a claims file in their drive history. So once you're hired on the case, the steps you want to make sure you're doing is preserving all the evidence. This is probably one of the biggest areas I see people leave a lot of money on the table and miss a lot of important stuff. The defense and the insurance companies will be out there within 24 hours. Some big trucking defense firms will advertise, we'll be out there 24/7, just call us. And the reason why is, one, they want to preserve the evidence themselves, but also they can help guide the investigation, give helpful information to the police officer that'll help paint things in the picture they want to be. A lot of times you're hired a couple months later, but if you're hired early in the case, you need to get out to the scene. You want to get out a preservation spoliation notice. And on these, this is a letter you send that asks them to preserve any and all evidence. Early in my career, we used to have a really long one that had like 150 things listed. What I realized is I need to start tailoring these because the judges said this is ridiculous that you're asking for all this stuff. So when you do your preservation spoliation notice, make sure it's tailored to that particular case. And imagine you're in front of a judge and you're saying, was the conduct reasonable? Another thing to know is third parties are not bound by spoliation. So like, if someone has evidence you want and they destroy it and they're not offended, spoliation does not apply to them. So remember that. I've seen lawyers send spoliation notices to like a gas station for video footage and they don't have to preserve it. Now, sometimes that'll work because they'll get scared, but you're better off trying to see if there's a way you can get it from them by playing nice. If they won't go along with preserving things, you want to get a suit on file and get a temporary restraining order. You cannot get that without a lawsuit. So you would file the suit, go to the judge, ask for a TRO. You want to make sure you understand how the procedure in that court works. It's all different based on what county you're in. And you're going to have a short hearing in front of the judge to ask for this. Always, always, always be honest. Judges get very mad if you're sloppy on these and they grant you a TRO. And once you lose your reputation on these, they're very difficult to get them to give them to you next time. And what the TRO does, it says, hey, you have to preserve the evidence by this order. Texas spoliation law is very weak. So I wouldn't count on winning a spoliation argument in front of a judge. Other states, it's stronger. We've had much better success in Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. But Texas, unfortunately, the appellate law is not great on your side. And the appellate courts have given a huge, broad leeway to the defense to destroy stuff, quote, loose stuff. And generally, it's not the attorneys. It's someone with the company where you see that happen. Retain the right experts. Again, when you want to get out to the scene, you need to have the right people there. Is this a supervision case? Is this a case where there was a malfunction of the truck? We had a case where a tire flew off the truck and hit our client's vehicle and kind of pushed it off the roadway. So we had a special expert that knew about tires that could go out and see what caused it to fly off. And don't just hire the first person that says they do trucking cases. I found it's like with a lot of things, if you hire the cheapest, you're going to be burned. And then there's people that are just so expensive that it doesn't make sense for most cases. There's a lot of good experts in the middle. What do an inspection, of course. Once you're in discovery, you want to file a motion to compel if they're not preserving the evidence. And what I do is we make a list of what the evidence we want. We do a process called theory of the case where we write down what do we want this case to be? Like, what do we hope happened? We hoped, okay, the driver had a terrible driving history. The driver was way over their hours of service. They drank the night before. Maybe they're on medication that impairs their ability to drive. And then we're making a list of those, and those are the types of things we're going after in discovery. A lot of attorneys, I think, are too broad in their approach to discovery, which makes it difficult to know what you're actually asking for. Don't accept no or objection. I mean, Cole or Jason, how many cases have we not had to do a motion to compel if it's a big trucking case? Almost every case, right? And they'll object. This is like standard objections. And we've had cases where then they answer and they haven't even talked to the client, which is interesting. We had a case where this defendant hit our client in a parking lot and sped off, and he was definitely drunk and he was in a commercial truck. And we filed suit. We get an answer on his behalf and they start answering discovery. And then we asked for his deposition and they're like, we can't find him. I was like, have you ever talked to him? They're like, no, we have never talked to him. And that made the case really interesting before the judge and motion to compel. And we ended up getting that case resolved right before trial. And they do that a lot. Like they'll answer discovery without talking to the client sometimes. Go to the scene, you'll be shocked by how much you're told by the defense. They usually will send a more junior person and they will share a lot of information that they probably shouldn't share. They will hide behind their objections. Then right before trial, like, oh yeah, we found this thing that you asked for. Spoliation load is, again, you want to make sure at a minimum you're asking them to reserve the vehicle, the logbooks. We had a case where literally the trucking company took the truck, sent it to a place, had it deconstructed and like sawed up and welded like into like 1,000 pieces after we sent the spoliation notice. And it was a brakes case. And like they literally got this truck as soon as they could and got it destroyed. It was pretty awesome because that they were in trouble in the spoliation notice in that case, like because they had destroyed it clearly after we asked them not to. But this is like the speed you want to move on these. And then also this comes back to case selection, right? If you do this on a bunch of bad cases, you go out of business. You have to focus, is this case one that it makes sense to be aggressive like this? Really, the source recovery is key in those. Okay. Conduct a safer search. This will tell you a lot about the insurance company or a lot about the trucking company. You can find their safety record, things like that. Really helpful, really easy to do, really fast. Do a policy limit search. There's groups that you can hire to ask for policy limits. Now, buyer beware, they are not as accurate in bigger cases. I usually look at it as mostly just an indication if there is insurance. We had one recently where they said it was a big excess policy. There wasn't an excess policy, but there was an underlying policy, or it'll have the wrong amounts. Here's an example of a spoliation letter. If anyone wants a copy of this, feel free to reach out. Temporary restraining order, again, tailor them. Next thing, go to the scene. I cannot state this enough. We've gotten so many cases resolved for 7 figures because we went to the scene. We talked to somebody to try to get video footage. And as we all know, video footage is everywhere, right? Doorbells, Ring, gas stations, restaurants, cars. Here's an example of a case where this evidence would have gone away if we had not gone out to the scene. So we represented one of the kids in the bus, and the injuries were not as severe as you might think from that incident, but that video footage added a lot of value. Running a red light in a school bus is a powerful video footage, and we were able to get that case done for a lot of money, and this was a big part of it. These usually disappear after 30 days, so they go away fast. That case I was telling you about before with the pedestrian, we went out to the scene and went restaurant to restaurant, place to place, and unfortunately, the video footage had been destroyed, but then the assistant manager said, oh, that thing, it was so crazy. I took a video of the video on my cell phone, and he actually had it on his cell phone that he recorded on his there. Then again, remember, they have no duty to preserve this evidence for you, no matter how bad you want it. Always do an inspection. This one here, so this next picture, this was a case where a commercial truck was doing repairs at a house. I can't remember what maybe it was roof repairs or something, and hit the gas and pinned our client, who was an old woman, against the wall in the garage. And like literally the car's still turning and she's like pinned up against it. And he claimed that the brakes malfunctioned and didn't work. And this is a case that said, oh, we can just settle early. You don't need to do an inspection, yada, yada. We'll accept liability. But that's powerful if they're claiming that. And so that adds a lot more value than just liability. And sure enough, we went out, did an inspection, got a brake expert, and the brakes were great. They were perfect. So that took that case from really good to like amazingly good, because now they're lying about hurting this old woman. And she was a really sweet lady too. And these were good pictures we got at the scene itself. And again, police don't always take a lot of photos. Don't trust your clients to take photos. Experts, they're hired and they may not care as much as you do about the case. Also, a lot of the good experts work for both sides. So it doesn't mean they're going to do a bad job on your case, but just know that they, may not look for everything you might want to look for. Of course, get the crash reports. Open records reports are hugely valuable. 911 calls are great. Body cam. I had a case one time early in my career. It was a police death case, and they had choked this poor man to death by putting their knee on his throat and tasering him a bunch of times. And through my investigation, I found out that tasers actually have video footage on them. When they shoot the taser off, it would record a video a little before and after. I was like, and that evidence actually proved liability because the police had a bunch of other stuff they were claiming, and they opened an investigation with the Texas Rangers, and a couple of those officers went to jail in that case. And it was because we found that taser footage, which was really, really cool. So just look everywhere. That's the lesson there. Because it was a very tough case, because it was a premises liability case, and our client was older. And when he got the 911 calls, and the exact same thing had happened like 10 times, and it was crazy. So here's probable cause affidavits are great as well. If you've got a case where someone was arrested, it'll typically have in why they arrested and what happened. Try to get the FMCSA request. to get the driving history of the driver. Here's an example of some good body cam footage we got today. We got a lot of good stuff on that. This was a really sad case I worked on. One of the first cases. It was a case where a truck killed three people and seriously hurt my client, and we represent one of the other wrongful death beneficiaries, one of the children. The police pointed the finger at our clients who were on their way to lunch, and this was in San Marcos near the outlet mall. And they said our client ran the red light. Of course, three are dead, and one has such a bad brain injury, barely knows their own name, has no memory of the incident. So here, so the light was green for the 18-wheeler. So we take the case, we start doing an investigation. First, we did a download of the truck, and it showed the truck was accelerating at impact. Next, we got the light sequencing report that showed that the light was likely red for the truck at the time. Then we got the 911 tapes, these different steps. We don't find that evidence. We tracked down this witness. We had him handwrite a witness statement. Something to note that with witness statements, and it may be a little different now with transcription of things, but we don't usually want to type those up because when the defense asks who wrote this, well, the lawyer wrote it and gave it to me. We'll have the witness either handwrite it or we'll do a recording of them, and no outtakes are admissible. And I just always assume that whatever I'm recording, I'm going to have to produce. So it's actually better if they sound like kind of rough because it makes it more authentic. This was another construction death case that we handled. Cases, a separate note, are kind of complicated on how you explain it, and that was a great example where that helped a lot. Medical records, this is another place for missed evidence, like where you can find really good stuff, and sometimes you find stuff you don't want to find. Like if your client wasn't wearing their seatbelt, you can find them. This one showed they were trying to say our client wasn't, and this showed that they were. Significant seatbelt signs from injuries. Social media and the internet, this is huge, huge, huge. We've done really well in a lot of cases based on social media evidence we found.
And real quick on the medical records, also think about the defendant's medical records too. If it's a very severe or catastrophic injury case, usually they're injured as well. And so their statements to those physicians are likely going to be admissible. And so we recently had a case where we subpoenaed the defendant's medical records and found out that he was kicked out of the hospital for coughing at the time of in the hospital. And we believed he was probably under some type of intoxication of the incident.
That's a really good point. Also, CPAP. A lot of people have sleeping issues, and truck drivers will have CPAP machines in their truck. There's nothing wrong with that, but if they're not using it at the time or not using it properly, they might fall asleep. And a lot of the sleep cases happen midday, usually between 2 and 6 p.m. For whatever reason, the human body is designed to like sleep at that time, and that's when a lot of those fall asleep cases happen. This little diagram is just to think about all the different ways that someone may be tied to the internet, what you might look at, cell phone, their truck, of course, any other mobile devices, and where to find it. So social media, of course. A couple of things on social media is you want to check it early. You want to take screenshots. I would advise you to try to get your clients to get off there. It's almost impossible now. They used to be a little easier, but clients almost never completely off social media. But you need to be careful what they post on your side. Because if they're saying, hey, having a great time on a vacation, maybe they're in a ton of pain, but that's great evidence for the defense to kind of attack your case. You want to train your team how to do this. There's some ethical rules you have to be careful of. You can't like friend someone in most states because that's you intentionally interacting with the defendant. If it's on the internet and open, it's free game. But you also can't ask someone who is friends with them to like go and look and pull stuff for you. So these are actual things we got from truck drivers' Facebook and Instagram pages. This is really hilarious that they would put this stuff up. And both these cases were speeding cases. Another example here, this was a really interesting case where pipes fell off of a truck. They were strapped not correctly, and they rolled off and landed on our client's car, which is scary as hell. And this was great footage we got from social media because there weren't any photos. Police didn't take any. And we were to get these to show what happened. Of course, they tried to downplay it whenever, the defense like, oh, it wasn't as big of a deal. And then you see the footage of these giant pipes falling. It was big. Here's some other good ones we have. Like terrible, but also it just the jury's going to hate this guy. Sources data, ECM, GPS, electronic logs, airbag control modules. Those can tell you a lot about the impact. infotainment. So the little screens in the middle that have the different things that the truck drivers can look at, can see. A lot of times they'll have extra devices that, like an iPad or something, that they'll put on their truck. That's why also getting to an inspection is important. If it went straight from the scene to a junkyard, you want to get out there so you can see what's actually in it before they come out and clearing all this stuff out. And you'll be amazed what you found. We found marijuana residue, like stuff showing they've been smoking marijuana in there before, all sorts of stuff. Also, when you're looking at their cell phones, you want to do a download. You don't want to just go off the records, like the billing records or the call records or SMS records. Now, if you're using WhatsApp, that's not going to show up as a text message. And the data, it's really tough to tell the phones now what's actually going on with the data. And you need to hire an expert to do it. And you usually have to get a court order. And what I would come in is prepared to agree to limit the time, limit what you're going to look at, because judges have gotten way less agreeable to those because it's basically someone's entire life. So you really want to come up with a good argument of what you need, why you need it in a short period of time. But don't give up, because that has been a huge source of evidence in our cases. We've had situations where a truck driver was looking at pornography at the time of the wreck. Like, that's powerful stuff that if you don't look, you're not going to find it. And my rule is the more they fight you, the worse it is for them. When we've had a case we've signed up that turned out not to be a good case and the defense had evidence to show it, they'll send that to me right away. When it's a great case, like, no, we don't share that stuff. We can't share it pre-litigation. So follow where they're fighting most. Cell phone enforce, internet, social media apps. What's crazy is, we show the judge this commercial. We're like, well, they've got it right here. Electronic logs. This one on the left's kind of old school, but this will actually track where they're going, how much they've driven, and there's ways that they can manipulate them. So getting toll receipts is really helpful. Like, so if they went through a toll area, trying to see receipts from where they bought stuff at gas stations can be really helpful. And it's amazing the tricks they can play with this. And if you start breaking it down and can prove it, that adds a lot more value to your case as well. In another case that I forgot to mention before, we had a case where there was a truck that was stopped on the side of the road, okay? And it was in a small town, and it was one of those areas of town where it goes from highway to kind of like city road, and I think it was like a 50-mile-per-hour area. And the truck is a little in the roadway, okay? Our client was about to go to his work as a pizza delivery person and runs into the back of this truck going 50 miles an hour. Luckily, he survived, had really bad facial head damage, but survived through it. And that truck had been there for like 8 hours. Now, what's the bad side for us, right? They're saying, hey, you hit a stopped object. It was not moving. And those are tough cases. But through discovery, we got the 911 tapes, and there was 911 calls of people complaining about this truck, and several said, I almost hit it. I almost hit it. And they hadn't put out the cones like they were supposed to, which they had lied about in their reporting to their company and also to the police. And that turned that case around, those 911 calls, and getting out to the scene to really see it. And it was a very, very hard case. The other thing is, when you're getting the logs, they'll only want to give you 7 days worth. They're required to hold 6 months worth of logs. So ask for that 6 months. Don't just stay with 1 to 7 days, and be prepared to explain to the judge why it's relevant. Bags can contain like vehicle speed, brake application, throttle application, and seatbelt usage, which can be really helpful. Even if they weren't deployed, sometimes you get that stuff. With autonomous driving, to see how much that starts coming into play. My car has semi-autonomous driving. Teslas have supposedly fully autonomous driving, but I wouldn't trust those. And then telematics. This is great for a couple of reasons. One, if a company does not have it and they're a bigger company, why not? Right? Look at all the things it could save, it could prevent. And again, it shows the emphasis on profits, not safety. They don't mention safety once in all of those things. And look at the cool ways they showed what it can prevent. Oh, if you ran a red light, we'll know it. If you did this, we'll know. If you speed, you will know it. So really helpful stuff, because they always try to blame just stuff happens, and truck drivers have wrecks, of course, and what were we supposed to do about it? Well, there's a lot of things they can do about it to help prevent these. Don't forget about WhatsApp, iMessage, all the different platforms now where people send messages back and forth. Of course, we talked about discovery. Getting the cell phone, you're going to have to get an inspection, get a cell phone expert to come do a download with you. Typically, they'll want to hire their own expert, and you agree to do them simultaneously at the same time. Like I said before, you want to kind of give on these and not be too aggressive with the judge a lot of times, because if you are, they may just deny it completely. It is crazy how many times like truck drivers got rid of their cell phone right after the wreck. It's like, I was going to get a new one anyways. Even after the spoliation notice. Experts you might need, accident reconstructionist, a cell phone forensic, fleet safety. That's a little different than an accident reconstructionist. This person's going to talk about training, supervision, retention, all the policies and procedures they should have in place. And then, well, if you have specific technology that you're trying to look at, it could be a certain type of download. Vehicles, you can get downloads from them now usually, but they're much more expensive to get, and you need a much more tailored expert. Versus trucks, you can find a lot of experts. Like vehicles, you have to have usually an expert on it, a Toyota or a Lexus or something like that. But there is evidence there. So big things. Act fast. Make sure you preserve the evidence. Go to the scene. Make sure your discovery is tailored towards the different technology. And I can't emphasize enough, like, be aggressive in discovery. When we work with other law firms, say we have a plaintiff, they have a plaintiff, I am shocked by how often an attorney just lets the defense lie behind an objection throughout the entire case. If you don't have an answer, you don't know if they have it or not. And the really good defense lawyers are really good at this. They're really good at massage and say, oh, do we have to have a hearing on this? Let me send what I have. But they won't put it in writing. So you want to lock it in so you know at trial what they're going to produce, what they're not going to produce. Data is great to tell a story. And then you can also, the technology we talked about, that's the standard of care, right? Technology is so ubiquitous. If a truck doesn't have these systems that can track them, you can make the argument that they should. And that alone is a violation of a standard that they should be accountable for. And with that, we'll take any questions.